Financially, there were two things. Number one was to get back to balancing the budget, get back to something where it was a sustainable, long-term financial path. That was number one. And the second thing financially was to build our cash reserves back up to a level that was prudent, safe, so that we could weather, hopefully not too many, but weather other storms that may come along. And and in our reserves in particular, build up our cash reserves. We and some of the things we're still working on financially, believe it or not, go back to 2003, 2004, where funds had these negative balances, and not to get too deep in the weeds on the accounting side of things, but we had to clear deficits in these individual funds, and the only way really to do that was to build up our cash reserves to be able to pay those off.
Mm-hmm.
So operationally, it was continuing. It's I think it's always really been about continuous improvement, and the fact that we had some revenue growth, the fact that our finances were stable, more sustainable. I still worry about that, but those were really the objectives.
So knowing these challenges, what made you decide to take the job as city manager?
Well, that in
Because
some respects, that is why I took the job as a city manager.
for the challenges.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, and you were recommended by Phil Batchelor, correct?
I was recommended by Phil, and he contacted me about the job, and he was very honest about it. He said it was going to be a hard job, but I'd known Phil a little bit, just from our paths had crossed throughout work we had done together in Contra Costa County, and I don't know why, but he thought I could do the job, and he asked if I'd consider applying, and I'm really happy I said yes. And Phil is an interesting person, and I don't think I'm revealing anything out of school here, but Phil is a very spiritual person, and he felt, in sort of the old puritanical sense that this was a calling, to work in a community that was challenged. If you did have the ability to help, there was this sort of calling to do so, and it, whether one is spiritual in that way or not, I think there's a little piece of that. That this was a community that was struggling. Phil at least thought I had the ability to help, and so it was almost an obligation. And I kind of feel that way, and he certainly did.
Richmond's definitely come a long way. I remember I got into real estate 15 years ago, and Richmond had a bit of a negative stigma attached to it, right? Mainly it came down to crime and mainly certain areas, right? And it's really come a long way since then. And in fact, I believe if I remember correctly, back when I got into real estate, Richmond would make the top 10 worst cities when it came down to crime. Now it's not even on that list anymore.
Right.
So there's been a lot of progress along the way. Where do you see Richmond going in the future?
I think that I see continued progress. One thing that is really hard for us to shake is that reputation. And I think it is a reputation that I like to think a decade ago that continues to follow us around. You're absolutely right. We were in the top 10. We were, I think, maybe top 5 even of what was considered the most dangerous cities in the United States, at least in our size category. And now we're not on that list. We've really reduced crime a great deal, and we do a survey of our residents every 2 years, and to find about services and attitudes and so forth. And we ask the same questions, so we get a trend line. And one thing that is really interesting to see is that every 2 years, a larger percentage of our residents think that Richmond is going the right direction, and every year a larger percentage of our residents are saying that they feel safer in the community and safer and safe in their neighborhoods, and that really is that's really good to see. Um, there's been a lot of talk about the drop in the number of homicides. I think we at least in my tenure, we peaked at
Right.
46.
Yeah, and I think we Richmond just went through a stretch, right, of 4.5 months of what was Sam? What was that stat for? Like 4.5 months of
From November through March, almost 5 months, we
no
had zero
homicides, right?
homicides. That's
Yeah,
right. And I think it's great that you raised that because to me, I think the city should shoot for having zero homicides. There's no reason that homicides need to be a statistic other than a zero. I think that's possible. I think that will take time. It'll take continued work by not just what we do, but by residents and their attitudes. But there's no reason to think that we can't be much lower in crime and completely free of homicides. That should be the goal. We shouldn't tolerate anything less than that.